Brad Morse, the program director for the modernization project with the Department of Labor and Industry. You know, it's 11 o'clock and doesn't seem like we got a whole lot of people still joining, so we will just start the answer hour now. You know, with me, I have Angie Andreessen. She's the business analyst for the program, and we should have some representation from the CRT community at the Department of Labor and Industry, so we can answer all your questions. And, you know, this will be a EDI focused answer hour, and we know that EDI focused answer hours are always a little bit more technical and sometimes can be more complicated. So put your questions in the chat and we will respond to them and talk about some of the scenarios that people are running into. The other thing I want to remind everybody is this meeting is recorded, so we will be able to post it you know, going forward. So please just know that. You know, with that, I think we will get started. Why don't you go to the first slide, look at the agenda here. We did do a small release last night of some fixes and some improvements to campus. It's a short week with the holidays, and we wanted to get something in, especially some things we saw that were structurally blocking some EDI transactions and some other functionality that other people have requested. So we wanted to get that in. Normally, we always do our releases on Thursday night, but you know, with this short week, we did one last night. So we'll give you an update on that. We'll talk about some known issues that we're running into, especially with this community. And then we'll do, you know, the question and answers. And then we have upcoming sessions. You know, next week we'll put that schedule up there. I would say again, you know, I like conversation. Let's just put some things in the chat. Once we build up a few questions in the chat, we'll have somebody monitoring, and they will read me the questions, and then we can we'll get them answered to the best of our ability, and so we'll go from there. So next slide. All right, so the campus release update is the this is where we get really technical. DN 192 must be equal to or greater than DN 56 for associated DN 85. That's something that was in our release where we were having some issues with that that logic. DN 72 must be greater than DN 003, basically 3. And then we have some you know, transactions attempted after a short URL accepted, unable to save is a draft. I believe, Angie, that is the web form, e-form submissions, correct?
Yep, that would just be impacting e-form submitters.
Yep. So then we have the DN 417 must be less than the MTC date, so we've got that fixed. But the big one that we were getting a lot of rejections on was the NT transaction rejected for the narrative length of over 500 characters. So we're not going to have that 500, or sorry, was rejecting for anything over 250, and now it will be up to the standard of 500 characters. So those are all been fixed last night, so we shouldn't have any issue for that. And we will put these release notes, we will send them to our communications department, and we will put them in our emails that we send weekly to our insurance carrier community, but we also will put them on the campus page website so people can see them and know that they're there. So next one, Angie. So some known issues, and I think there's another one out here too, but this big one here, this claim administrator claim number is an issue on some of the UR transactions. That is something we know, and in the guide we say that we are going to use it as match data, and right now that is something very difficult to fix, changing match data rules, because it does apply to all match data in the system. So what we are going to do, we are working on a fix for that right now, where we are going to update the claim admin claim numbers based on the submission of the UR. Now, everything that's been submitted up until I believe Monday, we have those, and we are going to force them into the database so that they will update. But we cannot reprocess the URs, so they will need to be resubmitted. We are still working on a spot check on that to make sure when we can tell everybody to resubmit those, but that should be coming in the next, either today or on Monday. We will let everybody know that they can resubmit those URs that are rejected for this claim admin claim number issue, and it will allow them to go through. In the future, if you run into that issue, the department can now change those in campus and can update them for you. So if you're running into that, they can do the quick update for you, and then you could resubmit those URs. And then, of course, in the future, we will have that that edit removed after we repost the guide and we give the appropriate time for that. We still have some editing on AR data elements that we've been talking to some of the vendors about. So what this is, and everybody in this community knows, ARs, if they're on there, we're supposed to be accepting them. But in some cases, when the ARs are some of the fields that have conditional logic around them, such as, first data loss time not being after or before a certain date, something like that, it's rejecting on those ARs because it's completely changing the transaction of the claim that we have. We do know that is an issue, and that by the guide standards, we are out of standard on that. We are working with the team to figure out when we could do a release of those, but we have to look at all of our AR data elements. But so that is up and coming. That will not be resolved now. I would recommend being very careful about those data elements that have conditional logic, because when we do put that fix in, it will immediately trigger audits because you're changing conditional logic that will now show you're out of compliance on certain things. The claim viewability, we still have some questions on that. And then we have date of birth SSN mismatch, and that's coming up basically from legacy data versus what you're submitting. And we're working on resolutions for that as what to do on those. All right, so I think some questions have been coming through. Is Todd on?
Yes, I am.
Todd, can you read the questions? Angie is being a trooper right now and filling in, being very sick. So we'll have Todd read the questions, and I will try to answer. And if not, I'll have to defer to Angie.
Okay, we have one from Kelly. When filing the NOID, I add a payment or a benefit?
Todd, I can answer this one. So when you're completing your suspension transaction, which is what I'm guessing you are referring to specifically, Kelly, you shouldn't be adding any new payments or benefits. That should be based on existing data that you already sent us, either via your UR or via like your IP. If you're specifically talking about the discontinuance web form, you would not add any benefits or payments to that one either.
Okay, next we have, how do you show or report withheld attorney's fees?
I don't know if John is on the call. I think he's probably the best one to explain kind of how this would work, if he's available to kind of run through that.
Yeah, yeah. Hi guys, I'm here. We do have the EDI FAQ document, which is on the website that we can put into the chat. But essentially, what you do is you keep your net and gross the same for that benefit type, but you can adjust the amount of the payment, basically to the amount that you're taking the offset. So if it's a 20%, we would pretty clearly see that you have 20% difference in your weeks and days to the total amount paid. And then we would appreciate if you could send say like an NT transaction telling us that you're withholding attorney's fees. And that's sort of our workaround for this period of time.
Thanks, John. I did go ahead and just put the FAQs in the chat. And I think number 11 is the one that specifically deals with attorney's fees.
All right, also from Bridget, there doesn't seem to be an EP for temporary partial disability. How do we report that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So whenever you are reporting something as EP, we're going to assume that it's full wage continuation. So when you're reporting those benefits on the EP, you're always going to report them as 250, whether it was temp total or temp partial, that you're trying to report the employer continued. Since it's just their full salary, we'll always expect 250 on those EPs.
Todd, if you're reading, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Could this release have affected the JCN and employee security ID fields? We are getting errors that started today about the JCN not matching on a FROI 02 for a previously accepted FROI 00. We are also getting errors saying the EE security ID, the WID, field does not match, even though it's the same number that was sent back on the FROI 00.
On those, if you could email those to John, can you put the EDI email address in the help desk?
Will do.
I would like those specific things. We did have some issues with people sending WIDs, so we putting different characters in the WIDs, so we were stripping them. And when we were testing it last night, it was working. So that could very well be related, and we will have to do a very aggressive fix on that if that's having an issue. So please give me those examples to that email box with the JCN, your trading partner information, and we will look into it and figure that out.
Bridget is asking if there are any period that EDI has downtime. When we don't process files. Yep, I don't think we do.
Yeah, Todd, I mean, you would know better than us. I don't think the EDI engine is ever off other than maybe during a system maintenance window or something.
Correct. Yeah, so, during normal business hours for sure, and evenings when we're not doing a deployment, and even during a deployment, I'm not sure that it's off.
And Todd, I've got another question that was sent just directly to me. So this person just mentioned that since last night, they're having some Shroys reject with a missing WID. However, it is in the transaction. So I think we've gotten a couple of reports of that today.
Okay. I will, yeah, give those examples of that EDI mailbox. And John, can you make sure you send those to me?
And Brad, I actually logged something this morning on that. Do we know the schedule when items are submitted and processed throughout the day? I have seen multiple times per day when some things, then other day, nothing submitted during the day.
It pretty much depends on when the vendor drops the files to us, and some of them have different times that they drop them, and then different times they pick them up. Once they drop them, we start the processing of those files. Depending on how large they are, some of these batches have thousands of transactions in them. They do take sometimes an hour and a half to process. So if you're in one of those large batch groups, you'll see that there's some lag time in it. But typically our engine runs all the time, but vendors have specific times that they drop and also specific times they pick up. So that, I think it's what you're asking is there's kind of three parts of that equation that's leading to when do things get processed. So from our side, when we get them, we process.
From Chad, he's asked for each release.
Yeah, well, I'll put that out there because we're going to start putting them on the campus page. I'm sorry, drawing a blank. It's a campus. There's a page out there for where we put some of the key information, and we're going to start putting the release stuff in there, especially for the technical stuff like this.
When filing new EDI FROI 00, please define accurate dates to put in the data fields. Initial date of lost time, initial date of disability, initial date of disability after waiting period. An example would be DOI of Friday 11/6/2020, left work early after injury. EE works Wednesday through Sunday, initial medical transaction, given work restrictions which can't be accommodated at work. It's a pretty detailed question there, John.
Yeah, John, you want to take that?
Yeah, so from this scenario, it appears that your initial date disability began is 11/6, and then you always count 3 days, so 6, 7, 8 are the waiting period. And then so the initial date, the first date of disability after the waiting period has to be 9 or later. And then depending upon what that work schedule is, though, that's where it may be later than 11/9. So yeah, it's probably 11/9, but it might be later depending upon what you're saying there. So I hope that helps explain. But it's always, some states, its initial date disability began is the day after the date of injury, and ours is whenever they start losing time or wages. That's DN 56, the initial date disability began, and then count that date plus 2 more, and then you're out of the waiting period.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, John. I know there's always a lot of confusion from people just about the waiting period. And what John said is exactly right. You always start from the first day and then count. So that's day 1, the next day is day 2, and the next day is day 3. It doesn't matter if they return to work. It doesn't matter if they're scheduled to work. The waiting period in Minnesota never stops and restarts. It's always 3 consecutive calendar days.
From Bridget, forms generated by campus from our filings do not have dates and payment amounts on them. This has been reported. Is there an update on this getting fixed?
I think maybe you'd have to give us specific examples, but we have noticed that the most common example is making sure that you get your dates into the EDI transaction so that they populate the forms. The most common one is not adding return to work dates, especially with suspensions. If you're suspending benefits and the person is returning to work, then it's critical to make sure that the return to work date gets into the EDI transaction so that that date also then populates the form. So if you have specific examples, send them to the EDI team and we'll take a look and try and triage them. But that's probably the most common one that we see.
This is Bridget. Sorry to actually talk. It's just easier than you to find my answer to your questions at the bottom of the chat later. This has been submitted with specific examples and screenshots of the forms, and it is on the IPs, so the initial payments. And so a lot of times there is not a return to work. So I don't know if that is causing it not to populate any dates or payment amounts. But all of our IPs that we've filed since we went live, none of them have dates or payment amounts on them.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. We'll have to take a look.
Yeah, I sent an email back, the second week that we were live, and then I did send an updated email with additional examples because additional forms, I did a CB or benefit change is also inaccurate and does not show the dates or the payment amounts or anything. And there are screenshots in there of the actual forms. The benefit information is in campus, so you can see that it came over and you can see what was paid in campus, just the forms have nothing on them.
that's great info. Thank you. We'll have to dig into it.
Yeah, it's really challenging because right now we're getting over 100 claims a week because of COVID, and we're filing all of these forms, and we can't use anything that comes out of campus, and so we're having to do everything twice to actually mail out forms that have the correct information on it. So, the soonest that this can be looked at would be greatly appreciated by us.
Thank you, Bridget. From Deb, how do we know the UR error is due to the claim admin claim number and not something else? I can just real briefly, this is Todd. That seems to have been the most likely one that comes up when we have that UR error. Certainly there are other issues as well that could be causing the URs to fail. One of the things we were going to do is to pull together a document that says if you get one of these errors, it may be one of these several things. So we can kind of compile the things we're seeing to give more clues. Long-term plan is to have better error reporting on those that gives you a better idea of exactly what the error is. But in the interim, you could watch for that document. From Kelly, what is the best way to get help? I have submitted an email several times to help email with no return call.
Yeah, on EDI specific stuff, John, we have them contact the EDI team, right?
Yeah, that's going to be quicker now. If you can just send it to the email address we put in there, the dli.edi@state.mn.us. That's the quicker way. Obviously we're getting a lot of questions, so we're usually a little bit behind, but we try and get to every single one, get them answered the best we can.
Yeah, that's for email. So it depends on Kelly what you're running into. If it's something like how to set up your group and stuff, that's something you would still go to the help desk. If you've emailed multiple times, can you just copy me on that email and I will look into it?
Yeah, and she said it was last week and it was an EDI question. And that was Brad Morse talking. You're welcome. Next question from Bridget. Filed CB, discontinuing TTD and starting TPD, but the form shows TPD discontinued. Should show TTD discontinued. How do I get it so that TTD discontinued check box is checked?
We know there's a lot of issues with the CB and how it's generating that NOID document. It's not, we have it logged and we're going to try and do our best. I guess just like you were probably doing with the other ones, Bridget, if you can make changes yourself, that's certainly fine with us, to make it reflect what you actually did. But we're certainly very aware that for some of these, it's not. That's especially the one generating off the CB is not working correctly.
We received multiple TRs this morning stating the employee security ID is required. All of them had the information. So this is the issue we talked about earlier. There is something logged on this and it has our attention. We're going to be jumping on this very quickly. Next question. Filed FN, it was accepted, but I do not see a form in campus. Still shows as open in campus.
And the FN doesn't generate a form. And the open close status, it means it's going through a final workflow to get closed. But basically, we know now that it's essentially should be closed on your end. So that's basically close to the last step to it being closed. So hopefully that helps.
Sorry, this is Bridget again. On the MTC crosswalk, it does say that a file closure letter would generate as a result of the FN. Should we just remove that from that crosswalk so it's not confusing if there is actual no form that's being generated?
Bridget, what do you have like a screenshot of where you're seeing that information?
In the MTC crosswalk, the
Yeah.
training material that you guys sent
It's
us?
in there. It's in there,
Yeah.
John. I think this is something that legal. Remember those forms that we send out when we close the file? So we'll talk about this, and we'll either update it or we will see what legal wants us to do with it.
For unreported asbestos claims, can I please confirm that we need to submit the FROI UI first rather than the FROI 00?
You can submit a 00 if you have enough information to do so. We found with most claims like that, because you're generally being named off of a claim petition, a lot of carriers didn't have enough information to even send a FROI 00, especially with some of the dates of injury on them. But if you have enough to send a FROI 00, you can send a FROI 00. But the FROI UI is a lot more relaxed as far as edits and data required. So, I mean, that's the one that a lot of people are choosing to do, especially because it's usually pending litigation.
Have a question about the NOID. They had a FROI accept last week, and now they're wondering how to submit the NOID.
The NOID, so this is going to be a suspension of benefits, not a denial. The NOID is so we have a workaround on that right now. So you still send your EDI suspension transaction, and then you can either do an attachment and have the NOID come in, or you can go in and upload a document into the transaction that is the NOID document. All that is outlined. It was sent out in an email. And John, you want to put the link to that campus page that has that in there, so that everybody can get access to it.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you.
So Brad, just to elaborate on that as well. So if your FROI was accepted last week and you need to file the suspension, you will need to submit your initial payment information before you can submit the suspension. EDI is sequenced like that. So if you have only submitted the FROI and you haven't done your initial payment transaction, you have to do that before you can submit your suspension information, just to clarify.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. And that transaction most likely is going to be the IP, is what people would file to send in that first payment information.
Yeah, so she's asking some follow-ups to that about adding the payment. Yep, so Kelly, do you have what you need on that one? I think so. If not, you can add more to the chat or go off mute. From Shauna, when submitting FROI initial payment, screen just shows spinning wheel for over an hour and then it just closes.
Todd,
Yep.
Todd, I just asked Shauna if she could send me just an email with some of that file information so that I can look into it.
Okay.
That sometimes is a data issue.
All right. From Kristen, I continue to struggle with rejections on a file where the salary continuation changed to TTD. I got the FROI to file FROI EP SX of EP and now can't figure out which form comes next to tell you that I started TTD. I have 11 rejections total. It's a total guessing game which form to file and fields on the benefit screen should be populated.
Yeah.
So the timing, what do you
go
think,
ahead,
Angie?
Jen.
The timing of that is that it probably should have been a CB instead of the SX, but I think now you're in a situation where I believe we accept either the RB that basically introduces the TTD or even the IP that would introduce the TTD.
Yeah, I think we would do in this situation, since you filed your suspension, you would need to file, I think you should file the reinstatement of benefits, just indicating that you're now paying TTV.
Sorry, I'm mute again. A question about where they can find the workarounds. That's the link you just upload. You just put in chat a few minutes ago, right, John?
Yep.
All right. From Shauna, what is the difference between the Schroy final and a NOID web form?
The NOID web form is like the old NOID number 3. You're discontinuing benefits without a return to work. Whereas the Schroy final is like the old notice of file closing. Essentially, you're not suspending or discontinuing any benefits. You're just telling us that the claim is closed from your perspective and that everything's done.
Okay, we got a long one regarding managing permissions to access claims. We changed our adjusters' permissions to global claim access. Members with this permission will have full access to all claims in which this group is a party from what it has been, from what it had been as service process designee members. With this permission, are included in the list of serviceable participants to be served anytime a filing is added to a claim, case, dispute, or appeal relating to your group. Designated contact for information requests from DLI members with this permission are contacted when DLI sends a request to their associated entity and receives a notification to respond to the request. In the new setting, the user only has access to claims they have previously accessed. They are unable to search for claims in the universe of all claims of our claimants.
So Todd, I just put a link in the chat. It's just a really quick reference video outlining claim access for TPAs and insurers. It is possible that some of them aren't showing up yet because the URs maybe haven't been accepted. But if you can send us, Bree, just send John and myself a few examples of claims that you guys are unable to see or search for. That would be helpful and we can research them a little further.
From Scott, can you explain the SUB sent to state transaction information? Does this mean that it has been sent and that the transaction is being held until it is reviewed and acknowledged?
So Scott, I think that may be a question you need to ask your EDI vendor. If you can confirm where you're seeing that, if you're seeing that in your vendor's portal or if you're seeing it somewhere in your own system, that would be helpful.
Yep, he said he's seeing it in Mitchell's portal.
Yeah, I would just recommend asking Mitchell about that because that is probably something that they handle on their end.
From Kelly, you have a reference document that states the old form name versus the new MTC definition, but isn't there something that gives us further info on how to submit versus just the new name?
I have a document I can grab that just has an overview of all of our EDI documents. Basically, there are a lot of technical documents that go much further detailed, but this is kind of an overview document. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And then I don't know, John, if you have any additional context for that.
I think that's a good takeaway. We could do better documentation for some people who are trying to submit, especially through e-forms. Otherwise, we do have a tremendous amount of technical documentation, but that may not be what they're looking for.
Yeah, and the document overview that I put in there, it basically just tells you what each one of our EDI documents contains. that's on the website. So it's kind of just a reference guide for where to find certain things within each of those documents.
When I've submitted a FROI by accident, what form do I file to tell you that?
I think this is similar to what we always did in the past as well. We don't cancel claims, or we don't delete claims. But if you've submitted an original FROI and it's created a claim in our system, just make sure that it it looks the way it's supposed to. If it was filed an accident because it's in another jurisdiction, you can always submit a denial then telling us that it's in another jurisdiction. Even though it may appear like it's met Minnesota lost time requirements for the waiting period. And then essentially that's like closing the claim on our end. We know that you filed it incorrectly, and it sort of rounds the picture on it.
Is there a flow chart for users submitting? Something that maybe shows the life cycle of the reporting?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything like that, just because every claim is different. So we can't specifically tell you what you necessarily have to file next. If you're not sure what you need to file next, you can always email us and we can try and kind of walk you through it. But I would recommend looking at that form to MTC crosswalk and kind of reading the definitions to determine what you're trying to do and what you need to submit next.
Yeah, and just to follow up, Kelly had added that the technical guidance is good to have, but some basic submission steps are helpful to get started with. From Alex, we filed an RB and a form was not generated, but it shows accepted. Would a form be generated? In the past, we would send an NOBR to the employee.
The RB would not generate a form.
From Janet, are you tracking the rejected transactions for each submission? How should we handle DOB conflicts? Error tells us our DOB does not match state.
So you can send those to the DLI email account, and we'll triage those and get back to you on fixing the DOB issue.
From Lisa, can you please show the step-by-step on how to file a NOID on an older claim that we recently filed a FROI UR, unable to locate the claim and form ability? So I'm not sure if the question is about how to find the claim to file the UR, or if you filed a UR and you're not sure about the NOID aspect of that.
Yeah, so I can throw together.
Sorry, Angie. So I know the locate a claim step. I mean, you don't even need to do that because it should, a UR, once it gets accepted, should show up in your claims list. So if we have a specific example you could send to us, we can see why it's not showing up in your claims list, because then you would be able just to file that, do the upload or follow the instructions that we have on the website. So that's something we definitely can take away if you just give us that information. Send it to that EDI mailbox.
And I can put together just a really quick reference video for where you need to go to file subsequent forms. It should be the exact same steps as when you did your UR. The only difference is that you don't have to type everything back in. That claim will just be in a dropdown for you.
Sarah made a comment that the edit event event table and trigger value is also a good reference for folks. That should be available on our website. Is that correct, Angie and John?
Yes.
Yes.
From Kristen, is there a specific person to email forms questions to, because I emailed my questions to the help desk with no response?
If it's related to e-forms, that can be sent to the EDI email address that was put in the chat. We can put that in again.
Yeah, let's put that in again at the end. All right, next question. I know how to submit the old way. Oh, someone's trying to figure that out. Okay. Does Minnesota accept the nature of injury code 74 for cancer?
I believe we should, and if for some reason it looks like we're not, let us know.
Guide says that an RB will produce a reinstatement of benefits. I assume this means an NOBR should create for an RB.
So I just have a question about that. So the form to MTC guide, it shows which forms are being replaced by a specific maintenance type code, but that does not mean that a document will generate. If you're seeing that in the EDI spreadsheets, please let us know, but you really should be looking at the implementation guide for what is going to generate a form. And John, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the things that are going to generate forms, the EDI transactions that would generate forms would be your FROI 00, your IP, which is your initial payment, your EP, which is your initial payment but wage continuation, you're not actually issuing a payment, your PD, which would be a partial denial, your O4, which would be a full denial, your CB, which would be a change in benefits, your SX, which would be a suspension of benefits, and that's going to depend on whether or not the employee returned to work. And then the PX for partial suspension of benefits, and the PY for your lump sum payments.
Yeah, I think maybe we could help this along a little. So there's that chart that we have on page 7 of the implementation guide that tells you whether or not a form is generated from the MTC transaction. So that's the first column that says yes or no. And then after that, it's telling us if a box is checked, it's either means you have to legally serve the employee the information from that transaction, or the last column, you have to copy that information to the employee. And I think we've been saying since we've gone live that in the reinstatement of benefits situation, you don't have to generate an old NOBR form or anything. We've kind of said if you're paying the employee and it's pretty obvious that they're getting information, that they're getting a check or they're getting the money transferred into their account, that may be enough to satisfy the check for that RB row.
And Angela was clarifying on the injury code 74 for cancer. She says she's getting an error on that one and wants to confirm whether it's on our end or if it's a vendor edit. I don't know if that's something we can check and get back to her, or she should check with a vendor. What do you think?
Yeah, we can look into that one. I don't think that we have any restrictions on those values unless it's a UI. And in that circumstance, we would only accept asbestosis. But other than that, I do not believe that there would be any values on our end that we wouldn't accept.
Hey, Angela, this is Angela. That was exactly what it was. I had just generated a UI. So it can only, the type of loss, do you still take 03 for the type of loss on that, or does it need to be type of loss 2?
It should be 2, and
okay.
I think it's 61 is your nature of injury. Yep.
Okay, so then in this case, it would probably be better to file the FROI 00. Will you accept that on there as well, or should it be asbestos on that one too.
Is it an asbestosis claim, or is it just
Yes.
okay, if it's an asbestosis claim, I would recommend filing it on the UI unless you have enough information to file your 00.
Okay.
So it should be done via the UI unless you have enough information.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
From Shauna, how do I get an older claim added that has a WID number, but it is not able to be located in campus? I've searched the employee name and DOI, but can't find it.
I apologize, Todd. Can you repeat that one?
Sure. Trying to file an older claim that has a WID number but is not able to be located in campus. I've searched the employee's name and DOI but can't find it.
All right. So in that instance, you might just need a jurisdiction claim number. If you're trying to, because Sean, I think you're an e-form submitter. So if you've got the WID and the date of injury, sounds like what you're missing is your jurisdiction claim number. Send us an email with that WID and date of injury, and we can get you a jurisdiction claim number so that you can locate it.
And then just a comment to Kristen from earlier about support, that she's been told that her email was forwarded by the help desk to the EDI team and still doesn't have a response. So the tickets that go to the help desk that then go to the EDI team are in a queue separate from the EDI inbox. I think both are being monitored. And so I guess, John, that's just something we need to confirm that folks are keeping up on that help desk inbox, SharePoint. A comment from Lisa, delayed from when we were talking about it before. I think it says, Angie, everything you just outlined for forms, i.e. abbreviated form letters equal regular form names, I think along the lines of useful information about how things map from old world to new world, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so I'm adding some stuff into the chat. I did put the form to MTC crosswalk in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and put our implementation guide. So John was talking a little bit about there's a kind of a table in that implementation guide, and it begins on page 7. That's going to outline which forms are generating documents and which would not generate documents.
From Bridget, is it possible to at least have a date acknowledged by Dolly on all the forms? I see it on the IP and EP, but not on the 04 denial, PD partial denial, SX full suspension, PY, NOBP, notice of payment. If we upload the forms generated by campus to our claims, we do not have the date they were created on the form. Would be helpful to know the date created without having to log into campus to look it up.
That's a good point. I think I know what she's talking about. We should take that as a takeaway, Todd. We can look into that date created.
Okay. Teresa made a comment. According to page 7 of the implementation guide, the FROI 02 says no, that the form would not generate. We are seeing amended FROIs generated on multiple claims. Should we not be seeing these?
I think we'll have to look at the specific scenario there. because I think there was instances where we were going to have to change and generate a new FROIO, depending on what data was being changed in that FROIO too. So send us the example, we'll look at it, and then we'll better clarify the documentation.
Okay, we have a question. Will we have another Q&A session soon?
Yeah, we have so we have an insurance carrier answer hour next week on Wednesday. It feels like this EDI group may need another one, so we can schedule one next week also.
Brad, it's appearing that it may be helpful, maybe even to go a little bit further and have the e-form submitters on a separate call as well. It seems like they're maybe experiencing some unique issues, so we can certainly look into that too.
Yeah, good call, Angie.
Question about how do I search a state form that I did not file?
You have an example of what that would be?
Yeah, maybe you could type in the chat what an example of that might be, and when we see that, we can come back to that.
And I can give a little bit of an overview as well. So if you did not file it, but it was filed, you should be able to see it on the claim details page. It would be in your documents tab on the claim details page. So I can show you all what that looks like. I'll get that kind of queued up. Todd, if you want to keep running through some additional questions.
Sure. Where do I find a filing that I saved as draft?
I can cover that one as well.
Okay. Has the UR submission deadline of 11/30 been extended?
That communication that was sent out originally, was based on, different factors. We know that we're having some system issues. So, John, we should probably get a communication out about those filing timelines. But I mean, yeah, obviously 11/30 is coming up in 5 days, and so we need to get out a communication onto extending those dates. And a lot of URs also. Some people's business scenarios are they don't send them until they need to send their next transaction. If that's not due for a month, some people don't send them, and that's also appropriate. URs are just to set the data for the 3.1 and set the sequencing for your next transaction. So it would be appropriate to follow your business rules and your business process on that. But we will get out communication on that.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run through just some visuals for some of those questions. So I did go ahead and I put a video in the chat that is specifically going to show you how to find your claims if you are in a trading partner dashboard or a trading partner group. So basically, if your dashboard does not look like this, that means that you are in a trading partner group. If you're seeing like a circle and you're seeing metrics and things like that. So if you take a look at that link, that is going to show you how to search for claims on the trading partner dashboard. Right next to that is going to have the My Forms queue. Now that is going to operate exactly the same as the My Forms queue on this page. So I'll show you all how that works. I just wanted to make sure that those of you in the trading partner group knew where to find that My Forms queue. So if you save something as a draft, if you go back to this My Forms queue on your dashboard, it will be there. Same as with your submitted ones. So your draft ones are usually just going to show as status draft right here. So if you go to My Forms, you should be able to pull those right out of draft. Now what you can do is if you need to pull them out of draft, this will be hyperlinked right here. And you can click on that and it'll take you back to where you were. Now there was another question about seeing forms or documents on claims that you didn't file. So if you didn't file them, they're not going to be in the My Forms queue. But if you go to this, go to a claim that you're looking for. So I'm going to go to Emily's claim here. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom of her claim and click on this Documents tab, you can see the documents that have been filed on this claim. These are going to display here regardless of who files them. So you can see these were created via EDI. But if, let's say Todd was one of my coworkers, he uploaded something into Campus to this claim, I would see it here as well. Hopefully that answers that question.
And a question from Sarah, again about the deadline for URs. She was told on a Q&A on October 28th that there is no deadline for URs.
Yeah, and that's what I want to clarify. There is no real deadline for URs. It just comes down to business process, and obviously you're not able to file claims. The communication that went out was talking about ERT and when they're going to start to look at more of the penalty action and things of that nature. But that's the email that we will clarify and get out a new correspondence on that.
We're at about 3-4 minutes left. I don't see any current questions in the chat. Oh, here's one. For my EP turned to TTD, here are all the transactions I've tried. So there's in the chat right now, the latest one, there's quite a list of transactions. And so looking for some guidance. I don't know, John or Angie, yeah. Can you see that in chat?
Yep, I'm looking here. It looks like, so we've got a ton of different transactions here that you tried. What you'll need to do since you did your suspension is you'll have to do a reinstatement of benefits showing the TTD. So it looks like that's not one that's been on your list. So if you want to try that, please let us know if you have additional issues with that or if you have questions with that one. But that should take care of it.
We file EDI through vendor EBIX, and there is a discrepancy between what fields they require and what Dolly requires. It is known that is this known and being addressed, or do we have to communicate with EBIX regarding this?
You should probably communicate with EBIX if you have, if you're their customer and you have requirements that you think are important or differ from what that we differ from what EBIX has. It's kind of up to you to talk to them. If you want to pull us into a conversation with EBIX or any other vendor, feel free to do so. We can always help talk with them. I know they're always trying to, all the vendors are always trying to do their best to facilitate the process of the EDI transaction. So I'm sure it's just a matter of us trying to iron out the kinks. So let us know if you need help. We're always here.
From Kristen, wondering, is the reinstatement called employer reinstatement?
Not in that instance. So the employer reinstatement, you'd only be using that as if you were reinstating that or that 250 element. Kristen, I'm gonna have you send me an email and we can walk through this one to see exactly what's going on.
Yeah, she says she's not seeing the reinstatement of benefits as an option.
With time check here, we are at time, and I do know that a couple of us do have to get off this call. We do appreciate everybody for asking questions. Please send emails to that EDI email box, and we will we'll work through them and get your questions answered. I'll work with Angie on getting some answer hours set up next week for the the EDI group and also the e-filers, so that we're able to have more discussion like this, because I think it is really helpful. But I just know that a couple of us do have to get off this call. So I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. We are recording the chat, so we will go through and grab all those questions. If anybody didn't get their question answered, we will go through there and answer those questions. Todd, if you could help facilitate that. All right, I've got to leave, but I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day and hopefully a good long weekend.